Welcome to our third video about logical fallacies. In the first video, we looked at a definition of what does it mean to have a logical fallacy, and we looked at 4 examples of different types of logical fallacies. In the second video, we looked at 4 more types, and now let's look in this video at a final 4 types of logical fallacies. Take a look with me at this one. This one is called the straw man. It's a very well-known and very common type of logical fallacy. And in it, what you do is you set up a weak version of the opposing argument and then knock it down to strengthen your own argument. You take the argument against what you're saying and you mischaracterize it as something that's very weak, like a straw man. A straw man, or a scarecrow, the kind that stands out in the field to scare away birds, you can push it over with your hand. You can knock it down easily. And the idea is in a straw man that you mischaracterize the other side's argument, and then you knock it over. Let's take a look at an example. Those against immigration are racist and hate people not like themselves. We know that's wrong, so we should not turn away anyone who comes. Well, here, the person arguing in favor of immigration says that people who are against it are racist and haters. Now, assuming those that are against immigration are doing it because of racism and because they hate people, that's assigning a motive to them that you simply don't know is true or not. You can guess at it maybe, but you haven't logically supported that. This is not a logical argument. What you're doing is you're casting your opponents as people who are really nasty people. And then, of course, we all know that we shouldn't support nasty people, so it helps you make your point against your opponents. Unfortunately, it's not a logical point you've made. Doing this is called a straw man logical fallacy. Number 10, the red herring, also known sometimes as a tangent. In the red herring, you raise a side issue that distracts the audience from what's really being discussed. This is another one that happens quite a bit. Just as somebody's going down a logical progression in their argument, when they hit a point where they can't support it that much, they might raise a side point that really isn't that related, but it distracts the audience from what's being discussed. Let's take a look. Assimilation of immigrants for security reasons doesn't allow international culture to flourish. International culture and food are fun and enjoyable, so this policy is not advised. Now, in our argument here, we're talking about the assimilation of immigrants and the balance between flourishing of culture and security. The fact that international food and culture are fun and enjoyable, that's really irrelevant to our argument. It doesn't really make a difference to the balance of our logical discussion about security versus culture, and that's what we call a red herring. What the reader or listener will do is they'll find themselves agreeing with the fact that food and culture are fun and enjoyable. Therefore, they agree with the point being made, but they don't really think through the logic of it. Be careful with this one. Avoid tangents and red herrings. Number 11 is the false dichotomy. And this is where, when you're talking about a complex issue, you cast the argument to make it as if there's only 2 choices. Then you eliminate one choice to only leave one option. It's a way of convincing your audience by oversimplifying the issues at stake. Let's take a look at the example. Either you stop the flow of immigrants into the country, or you allow criminals to wander the streets. Well, if we decide that we're going to decrease the number of immigrants in a country, surely there's lots and lots of factors involved that need to be looked at. The word dichotomy means only 2 choices. And here the choice is cast as stop the flow or else there'll be criminals walking in the streets. Well, we know we don't want criminals wandering the streets. And so therefore it only leaves us with the option of, we better stop the flow of immigrants into the country. This is called a false dichotomy. Oversimplifying things so that we say, if you don't do this, then this will happen. Or you must choose between this and this. And usually the second one is a very bad one, and the first one is what we want our people to do. Persuasive, but not logical. And the final logical fallacy we'll look at is called the loaded question. This is when we ask a question with an assumption built into it so that you can't really answer the question without appearing guilty one way or the other. Let me give an example. Shouldn't you be bothered by the idea of ignoring the needs of immigrants by turning them away? What are the possible answers that someone could say to me? Or to simplify it, you're kind of asking them, doesn't being mean to immigrants bother you? Now look at the possible answers to this question. If you say, no, I'm not bothered by the idea of ignoring the needs of immigrants, then you really sound like a kind of nasty person. You're not bothered by just turning people away who are in need? Well, that makes you look bad. So your only other option is to say, well, yes, I'm bothered by the idea of that. And that means, aha, you're agreeing with my argument. So by asking a loaded question, I'm pushing you either to choose an option that makes you look bad or to choose the option that makes you agree with my argument. Like most logical fallacies, it can be convincing to an undiscerning reader or listener, but it's not a logical argument. It's a fallacious argument. So let's run through those 12 fallacies one more time. The hasty generalization, assuming something about a whole group based on a small sample. The non sequitur, a statement that doesn't follow logically or is not clearly related to anything previously said. The post hoc, assuming that since event B happened after event A, then event A must have caused event B. The slippery slope, a claim without evidence that the end result of something will be disastrous. The weak analogy, comparing two things that are not alike in all aspects, assuming they're more alike than they are. The appeal to popularity or the bandwagon, everyone's doing it, therefore it must be right. The appeal to authority, using a person with authority on the subject as evidence for the argument. Appeal to ignorance, showing that there's no conclusive evidence against my argument, therefore it must be accepted. The straw man, setting up a weak version of the opposing argument and knocking it down to strengthen your own argument. The red herring, raising a side issue that distracts the audience from what's really being discussed. The false dichotomy, setting up an argument so there's only two choices, then eliminating one choice and leaving only one option. And the loaded question, asking a question with an assumption built into it so that it can't be answered without appearing guilty. Those are the 12 logical fallacies that you need to know for this class.